you all know that we are going to talk about what's that bird sitting on, right? And that's the topic of today's discussion. And so let's begin with where are birds found. You can unmute or type in the chat box. Anyhow, anything that you like. Where are they found?
You can also raise your hand. So, and then we'll unmute. We'll ask you to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, Rohan is typed in the chat box. Rohan says it's trees, water bodies.
Very nice. Marshlands and grasslands. Very nice. Almost everywhere. Wonderful. Great. Everywhere. Yes. But are the same birds found everywhere? Houses also. Very nice, Rohan. Are the same kinds of birds? No. And why do you think that is?
Oh, we just talked about this today.
Wonderful. Habitat. Amazing. Great. So there are different habitats which have different kinds of birds. And what are these habitats formed by? They are not adapted to other habitats. Very good. Because different birds need different habitats. Fantastic. So what are habitats formed by? Here we see 4 different types of habitats, and I'm sure you'll agree that different kinds of birds are found in all different 4 habitats here. Vegetation and nature, very nice. So here in the first picture, you see there's a lot of foliage and it's green and it's dense, right? So it's sort of an evergreen forest. Okay, so it's a forest, one of the habitats that birds use. Yeah. Second one is also a forest, but you see the trees are sparser and there's a lot of leaf litter underneath, right? So it's a deciduous forest, it's a drier forest. It's not always green. So the birds that will be found in such kind of forest will again be different. We spoke about water bodies and they're found in marshland. So this one here is a very unique kind of forest called mangroves. Have you heard of the term mangroves and mangrove forests? Yes, very nice. So you might know some birds that are found exclusively in mangrove forest because they have adapted to that kind of habitat. And as opposed to mangroves or any very wet place, there is an extremely dry place like seen here. There's a bit of grass. There are very scanty thorny trees around. Would you call this a forest? Would this fourth one? Yes, desert. Very nice. It's a scrubland or a grassland kind of forest. It's still a forest, right? So forest doesn't need to look exactly like the first image. Anything that has hot desert, very nice. Anything that has a vegetation, a bit of cover, very lightly wooded. Fantastic. Great. So my point is, there are different plants here, and as one of you mentioned, nature and vegetation that is found in the place comprises of a habitat, and depending on what kind of habitat that is, different kinds of birds are found there. Correct? So habitat is something that an organism uses to get all its needs met from, right? It will get its shelter, food, a place to rest and everything. So what is happening here? So we're looking at different birds on trees, and what do you think each one is doing? You can tell me whatever this makes you. Perched, very nice. Anything else they might be doing? They're perched, so basically they're sitting on a tree, on a branch of a tree, looking for prey. Very nice. So birds, whenever we think of bird, making nest, very nice. So whenever we think of birds, trees is a so mostly indivisible part of a bird's knowledge or how we think about birds, right? So whenever we think birds, there is always, we imagine a bird sitting on a tree or eating something from a tree or making a nest on a tree, right? Foraging for food. So birds do different things with trees, and these trees determine what kind of birds will be around them, right? So there's a very intricate and very well known also, relationship between birds and trees. Yeah. So we know what we know what birds look like and what they may be doing on trees. But if you want to explain exactly, for example, you have gone birding and you have come back and you told me how your birding went. So you might tell me about the number of birds you saw, the different species that you saw. But what if I asked you, what were these birds doing? What was happening around them? And how were they interact? How were they using their habitats? So if you want to describe a bird's life in more details, it will be very nice to know different parts of trees, because they utilize habitat and the trees that they perch on or feed on or nest on in various ways. So let's start with knowing some parts of trees. So this black arrow will point at a part of the tree and you have to tell me what that part is called. You can again type in the chat box or you can unmute and tell your answer. So first part is this whole part. Canopy. Very nice, Zalak. Any other names for this part of the tree? Canopy is absolutely perfect. What about this part? Bushy, very nice. Yeah. So it's dense and it has a lot of leaves, which can be called bushy. Very nice. So it has a bushy canopy or a dense canopy. These are branches of the tree, right? Then what about this? The unbranched or the major chunk. Yes, it's called a trunk. Very nice. It's also called a stem in botanical terms, but a trunk is a woody, large tree trunk. Very nice. Great. Now there are parts of tree that are also underground. What about this? So here is where ground was, and this is underground. So these are roots, right? So these are all parts of a plant that all plants will have. Yeah, they'll have roots, they'll have a trunk or a stem, they'll have branches, and they'll have a canopy or leaves. Then sometimes during a particular period of the year, the trees or the plants, they'll have some colorful things growing on them, and they're called flowers. Very nice. What happens after flowering? Fruits. So flowers of the tree that born so that fruits can be formed. And what is inside a fruit, we'll come to that later. Yeah. So now let's look at flowers more closely. So we're looking at parts of flowers. What is this part of the flower called? This pink colorful part. Yes, very nice. They're called petals. So the major, most attractive part of a flower is the petal. Great. What about this green one? Stem or stalk. Yeah, it's where it's how the flower is attached to the plant. And when you want to pluck a flower without damaging it, what we do is we pluck this stem part of the flower and then it stays like that. Yeah, so that's the stem. Oh, petiole, very nice. Very nice, Akshaj. Great. What about this tiny part here? It's a bud. What does a bud do? What happens to a bud? What is the process, or why does a bud exist on a tree? Grows into a flower. Very nice. So the bud is like a young flower. It transforms into a flower. It's the beginning of a flower. Very nice. So it opens into a flower. Right. So even leaves, when they are younger, when they're not very strong, like a baby, they're inside a bud. And then when eventually when it grows, even the leaf will come out from its bud. Exactly like how it happens in a flower. So there's a bud and then it opens into a flower, and it encloses the inner part of the flower. Fantastic. So talking about the inner part of the flower, do you know what these are called? So these are the petals. We identified petals. What about these yellow parts? Anther. Very nice. Stamen. Amazing. Pistil. Yes. Pollen. Yes. So pollen is also coming here. So this is the male part of the flower, which contains pollen. Pollen grains. Right? Very nice. Then what about this part? Stigma. Fantastic. So the stigma is where the pollen is supposed to go. Yeah. And that's how the fertilization in the flower will happen. And the flower will eventually turn into a fruit. So the flower has male female parts. Male part produces pollens which have to be transferred to the female part from the stigma to the style and in the end towards the ovary. And then once this procedure happens, once the egg or the ovule in case of plants, once it's fertilized, it turns into a fruit. So the ovary of a flower turns into a fruit and the fertilized ovule inside turns into seeds. Yeah. So now the pollination has happened and we're looking at a fruit now. So what are the different parts of a fruit? What is this one pointed by the red arrow? It's the flesh. Very nice. Is this a part of the fruit that we eat? Yes. And what happens when a fruit stays on the shelf or in the refrigerator for a very long time? Endocarp. Very nice. It rots. What do you mean by rotting? What happens? What do you think happens by rotting? So it gets overripe. Very nice. So this flesh is actually meant for the seed to get nutrition, right? So what happens is as the fruit stays for very, very long, it becomes inedible in some cases. Very nice, Akshaj. So this nectar, it disintegrates. It gets dried. Very nice. And that gives out the way for the seed to come out, right? So this flesh is a means for the seed to be either carried away or to get nourished or to come out of the fruit. But this flesh is what us and even birds are very, very interested in, right? This is the sweet part, nutritious part that we love to eat. Very nice. What about these in the center? We already spoke about it, so you all know it already. Flesh protects the seed as well. Very nice. So we are looking at seeds. Fantastic. So what do birds do on trees? So now what have we done so far? We have identified habitats. We've identified that trees or plants form these habitats. We've identified that birds interact with plants. Now we know parts of the plant. Now we will look at what do birds do on trees. So I'll share a link with you and I need you all to write in your answers, type your answers in there so that we can see. What do you think about this? Okay, here's the link. You can open this link and you can type in your answers.
You'll have to share your screen, Sayee.
Yes, I'll do that. All right, have you got it? Have you got how to use this?
So you can either click on the link that Sayee has shared, or if the link is not working, go to menti.com and use and put in this code.
Yes, we already see some words coming. Very nice. It's okay if you put lesser words also, just one or two or just one. There's Sally. Okay, very nice. They make nest, they build, glean, eat, feed. Make nest, very nice. So make nest is sort of our dominant answer. Transfer pollen race, fantastic. Perch, rest. Anything else? A few more answers should be coming. Only 7 people have given the answers.
We have 11 people here. We should have 11 answers.
Yeah, 8 so far. Very nice. Okay, so they roost, they nest, they lay eggs, carry out life activities. Fantastic. They get shelter. Wonderful. They glean, eat, foraging for food, transfer pollen grains. Beautiful. Right. So these are all sorts of activities that birds do on trees, which can be categorized into resting, nesting, and feeding. Yeah. Do you agree with this? Resting. So they'll just perch, or they'll take rest, or they'll sleep or roost. Yeah. They'll build nests on the trees, and they'll also get food in different ways. Yeah. Fantastic. So all of us are done. And I will stop sharing this and go back to our presentation. Just a second. Okay. So now we have, where is it? Sorry, I can't see my slide.
That's fine. We'll wait.
Okay. All right. So now we know what birds are doing on trees. But do you think all birds use the trees in the same way? Do they rest in the same way? Do they nest in the same way? And do they feed on the same things on the trees? They don't, right? So each bird will have a different way of interacting with the trees and with plants around it, right? So let's imagine we are a certain bird, and let's see what or how this bird will interact with different plants. Yeah. So imagine we are a Baya Weaver, very nice Anvita. I'm like, I would need your help in identifying birds. Okay, I'm not paying much attention to birds, but I know a bit about trees. So let's combine this knowledge. Yeah. So we're looking at a weaver bird, and I might have a wrong name here. Okay, yeah. So what will Baya Weaver feed on? Here is an example. It will feed on grains. Yeah. So it's using these grasses and grain type of plants to feed on. It doesn't directly feed on anything that a tree might produce. Yeah, it relies on smaller um, plants called grasses or green. The seed that they produce is called grain. So before we go to that, tiny objects is a nice answer. Yeah. So when they do not have any babies, I think they feed on seeds, and they're sort of vegetarian. But when they have babies, when they have chicks to feed, they will catch insects, because it has a lot of protein, and the babies need to grow strong and fast. So they give them highly nutritious, proteinaceous diet that comes from insects. Yeah. So where will you rest? These Baya weavers are usually seen in which part of the canopy? Would you remember? What kind of trees do they choose to sit on? Or which part of the canopy also, for that matter? Like, is it in the center of the canopy? Is it on the edges of the canopy? Is it on the tips of the canopy? In case of a Baya Weaver? Center. Okay. So they go inside, like they stay closer to mixed branches where there's a dense canopy of sort, so that they remain protected from the predators around. Yeah. What about nesting? What kind of nests would they build, or where would they build their nest? Where do they do that? They weave their nests. Very nice. What do they use to weave their nests? We can talk about that as well. So the nest hang from a tree. Very nice, Zalak. They use grass. Fantastic. So here we are not only looking at where on the plant the nest will be, but also what they will be using to build their nests. Jagro, twigs is a very nice answer, but since they have to weave, twigs will be a little hard to weave, right? So they use something more flexible, like a string, which is provided by a grass blade, dry grass. Very nice. So that's what they use for making their nests. So did you get this exercise? Midrib of leaves, very nice. Why do you think, Akshay, they use a midrib of leaves?
Ma'am, it is very easy to get the midrib of leaves, as where they make the nest, it might be a chance that they're next to their nest only they have a bunch of leaves, so they can gather them easily.
Yeah, that's a good answer. But I disagree on the part that midrib is easy to get because it's like in the center of the leaf. No, it's not very easy. You have to scrape off all the things that are besides the midrib. They use midrib by your logic because they're strong. Rohan also says that. So it's thick, but it's flexible and it's very, very strong. Yeah, so they use
Yes,
this midribs and
ma'am, but in cases of very few leaves.
okay. Jagjot says, I've seen a weaver try to break away a palm leaf. Very nice. Yes, that is true. That's very true. So they
Ma'am,
use anything.
cases of like coconut leaves or palm leaf, like thin leaves type.
Yes, so they use blade, leaf blade. They don't use a big broad leaf because they won't be able to weave it together. Can you think of a bird that might be using broad leaves for making nests?
Tailor birds.
Very nice. So what do they do with these broad leaves?
They just make a nest of those leaves.
Yes, that's correct. How do they make that nest?
They sew the edges of the nest and keep around some part open for going in.
Yes, correct. So what they do is they just join together two broad leaves and they use very fine grass blades or threads that can come from plant source itself to weave them together, to sew them together. And then, like Jalak said, they leave a part open and use that as an entrance and exit of the nest. Very nice. Great. So now let's imagine we're different birds and see how they interact with trees. Okay, so imagine you're a, what bird is this? So Meher asked, how do they sew the leaves? And Rohan answers that question. They join them using grass, like we use string to join cloth. Yeah, maybe on YouTube, when we have more time, we can go and look at a video of how Tailor birds sew leaves together and make their nests. Is that good? Yes. So now we're looking at a flameback woodpecker. Yeah. So if imagine you're a woodpecker, so what would you feed on? Firstly, insects. And where do they get these insects? On trees. Very nice. Which part of the tree? Now we know parts of trees. Tree holes, hollows, inside trees, trunk. Can you be more specific than a trunk or stem? Bark. Very nice, Akshad, you got it. So they open the tree bark. Very good, Samit. And hollows also. So they use all sorts of grooves and niches on the bark or in the trunk or even branches of the trees, and they gather insects from there to feed on. Fantastic. So we already have one answer about the nest, but let's maybe elaborate on that. Where do they nest? How do they use trees for nesting? Coconut tree barks mostly. Is that what you've observed, Akshaj?
Yes, ma'am. There is a lot of activity near my home of this bird, and I've seen it quite times. I often see it on like coconut trees perching or either looking for prey inside the bark.
Oh, fantastic. Has anybody else seen woodpecker on any other trees other than coconut? Thick tree bark. Very nice, Jalak. They also use date palms. Oak. Fantastic, Shakti. Thanks for that. Great. I have seen them in some dry parts of Karnataka on teak trees. So we see it's one woodpecker. It's using trees in the same way. What it's doing is it's perching on the trunk, it's perching on the bark, or it's looking for insects in the bark, but it's using different species of trees as well. So it doesn't have to rely on only one species of trees. So one single bird, one kind of activity, but different trees can be used. They have a very hard skull, very nice. And so they're able to build their nests using this very hard skull by, how do they nest? Pecking. Very nice, Rohan. Pecking. Very good. Like a drill. Great. So they literally act like a drill and they are drumming. Drumming is also a word that Misha has shared. The hard skull protects their brain from getting damaged. Very nice. So they make holes in the trees by activity called as drumming or pecking. Pecking, I think, is more gentle and it doesn't exactly make holes, but they drill holes and they make their nest inside. So this woodpecker feeds on insects in the bark. It makes nests in the trunk by making holes, and it perches on various kinds of trees. Very nice. So now we have imagined what it was like to be a woodpecker. Now let's imagine what it is to be a what bird is this? Barbet. Very nice, Samit.
Coppersmith Barbet.
Coppersmith Barbet. Okay. Thanks for the guess, Anvita. That's a good guess. It's a Coppersmith Barbet. Okay, so same questions for Coppersmith Barbet. Imagine we are a barbet, and what would we feed on? For ourselves, we don't have babies yet. So what do we feed on? Berries. Very good. Insects. Okay. It's quite similar to woodpecker. Very nice. Fish. Okay. Has anybody else noticed Coppersmith Barbet feeding on fish? Plums. Fantastic. So insects, plums, berries. Great. Do you know any special kind of fruit, juicy fruit, very nice, that Coppersmith Barbet loves very much? Small berry, okay.
Yes, I guess it actually feeds on some tree which has poisonous berries which no one else eats, but he eats it and doesn't get poisoned. He just excretes it.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a good strategy to just swallow the poisonous part of the fruit. Very nice. Okay, so I'll answer my own question. These barbets, they're very fond of this particular kind of fruit called figs. Have you heard of fig or ficus? Yes. So Coppersmith barbets are very fond of ficus, and it's a very common practice that if you have any kind of ficus tree around you, whether it's a country fig or also called as cluster fig or gular or a banyan tree, Rohan, you should definitely check out what kind of birds visit this tree then. Yeah, so if you have any kind of ficus tree around you, you will definitely hear the calls and see a lot of activity of barbets around you. Very nice. So what about where do they perch? Which part of the canopy do they use to sit? People is also a fig or ficus tree. Great. Edge, yes. Where else? Considering that's why these birds make nests. That's correct. Correct. So you may find some kinds of birds around your house because you can have certain kinds of trees around you. So these trees attract a lot of birds, and what kind of tree there is determines what kind of birds will come. Thin branch, very nice. What about right at the top? Yes, that's what Misha says. Okay, so they not very deep, correct. So they remain at the edges or at the periphery of the canopy. Very nice. What about when it comes to nesting? There was one answer already about Coppersmith Barbet's nest. Middle of the canopy, way inside. So what kind of nest does a Coppersmith Barbet have? They sit deep in the canopy. Very nice. Let's come to nesting now. What about nest? Normal nest. Okay. What's a normal nest? Like our house? 2 BHK? No. Okay. Anybody knows what kind of nest does a Coppersmith Barbet have?
Maybe a basket-like figure made of twigs, leaves.
Okay. Not observed. All right. So I have an image here. You see this image? So somebody pointed out earlier that they are quite similar to woodpeckers in this case. So they also make nests in tree holes, but they don't make the tree holes themselves. I've often seen them use tree holes made by other people. Is that right, Misha?
No, they do. They do.
They do?
Yeah. Like woodpeckers, barbets also drill holes. You can see them go at it, and they make very, very neat, very clean circular holes in tree trunks. Only woodpeckers and barbets do that.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's news for me also.
Yeah.
Awesome. So see, Misha mentioned that they make very neat circular holes, and this is what you see here. It's quite neat. Have seen a green barbet. Okay. All right. So are we clear about how the barbet uses trees in different ways? What do they feed on? They feed on fruits, berries, fig fruits mainly. Also insects. They will rest towards the edges of the canopy, and they don't really use deep centers unlike Baya Weavers. There are some fruits or berries in the first picture. Yes, there are. So if you see a cluster of fruits and each fruit has a hole on it. Can you see a hole right here? This has a tiny hole. Yeah. So when you see a fruit like that on the stem directly, it won't have a stalk, and it has a hole like this, you can say that it's a fig fruit. It's a type of a ficus. So even our banyan and people and country fig or cluster fig will have this kind of a fruit. So maybe next time you are around any of the ficus trees around your house, take a look if it is fruiting and how the fruit looks. It's yellow or orange in color. Very nice. Yes, that's correct. Figs are often very attractive in color. What color is the fig that we eat? Red, yes. So it's a purple red kind of fruit. And it's a fig season now, so you should definitely try figs. Yeah? Okay. Another way to imagine to be a barbet is to eat figs and try and drill a hole in the trunk. Purple brown. Great. Okay, so let's move on from barbet to our next bird. This teeny tiny bird is called sunbird. Very nice. Oh, I'm not sure if it's a lot, and actually I didn't look for many specifications. So let's consider it's a sunbird. It's a purple sunbird. Great. Superb. Now let's imagine we are a sunbird. What would we feed on? Nectar. Fantastic. Spiders, yeah. Nectar. Fantastic. So where is this nectar situated? Is it the nectar that we spoke about in the fruits?
The nectar from flowers.
Yes, correct. So sunbirds feed on flowers. How can we, if we had not observed them? Yes, beaks. Thanks, Rohan. I was just coming to that. So they have these straw-like beaks, which are also pointed, perfect for entering into a tubular flower with nectar, which helps them reach inside the flower. Very nice, where the nectar is situated, and then drink that nectar. Very nice. What about nesting? They have long tongues also, Samit. Yes, you're right. Like hummingbirds. Yes, correct. Okay, so next is never seen a nest. Okay. Joshika thinks they make nest on the edges. Is that what you're saying, Joshika? Yeah. Okay. Not observed. All right. So Joshika, now we have an idea that they're on the edges. Joshika, have you seen a nest, and do you want to explain or describe how the nest looks? It hangs from the branch. Very nice. Hanging, yes. So it's a hanging sort of nest that the sunbird makes, and it's on the edge of the canopy. So it looks something like this. Although it's a purple rump sunbird. I didn't find a picture for a good nest made by a purple sunbird, but it has a similar looking nest. Is that right, Misha?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it looks something like this. What do you think this is made of? The structure? Like a weaver bird, yes. But it's not as shapely or as luxurious as a weaver bird's, I imagine. It's made of dry leaves, dry fruits, okay? Anything else? Anything else you notice in this picture? Twigs, okay? I also see some threads that, yeah, it is shabby, I agree. In fact, if you ever notice something hanging from an old nest, in fact, hanging from it, you might think some garbage is hanging there. Fibers. They also use spider webs, very nice. They do bring the threads from spider webs and they put it around their nest. Yeah. So if you ever see a sunbird nest, it might look like some piece of garbage. But if you see closely, then it has all these elements that we just enlisted, that they have weaved together, that they have joined together to make this beautiful nest. Yeah. Now, what about resting? Where do sunbirds usually perch themselves whenever they're looking for food? It looks like an ant's nest. That's interesting. They're in the branches. Very nice. Where are which part of the, yeah? Bushes. Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you. Below the canopy, bushes, branches near the edge. Okay. Okay, great. So this is the part of the tree or the canopy or bushes that birds will use. Hey, before we go ahead with imagining being different birds, I want to tell you, do you know different types of plants? Like there are some woody plants, some non-woody plants. What are the types of woody plants and non-woody plants? Would you like to enlist some? I'll start with trees. What other kinds of plants are there? Yes, many plants. Very nice, Akshaj. So there's a category of plants that can be called trees. They have a woody stem, a huge trunk. They grow very tall. They have branches and a canopy. Trees, shrubs, herbs. Fantastic. Anything else anybody wants to add to that? Trees, shrubs, herbs is the exact categorization that I was looking for. Are there any other categories of plants? Ferns, very nice, Jagjot. Algae, bushes. So bushes can be called shrubs. Grasses, very nice, Misha. Anything else? Creepers and climbers, fantastic. Great. So now reticulate venation. Oh, very nice. Do you want to maybe tell everyone, Akshaj, what reticulate venation means? Do you know what it means?
Yes, ma'am. Reticulate venation is like, one by one leaf on each side. And to be precise, it's often observed in fibrous root, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Okay, so you've used all the right terms, but let's just put them in separate sections. So venation is, yes, parallel venation is another term that can come with this. There are two types of venation seen in plants. Okay, there is reticulate venation that Akshaj mentioned and parallel venation that Jalak mentioned. Jalak, do you want to tell what parallel venation is? Then maybe we can compare the two.
Yeah, parallel venation is basically that the leaves of a particular plant or the veins in particular leaves of plants are parallel to each other or going in a straight line. They
Yes.
don't usually intersect or go in different directions. And
Okay.
along with parallel venation, there are always fibrous roots and monocotyledonous seeds.
Beautiful, Jalak. Thank you so much. Anvita, you wanted to say something? Can you please unmute and say? Like in the leaves, it spreads out everywhere. It's like a net structure. Anything else? That's it? Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Anvita, Jalak, and Akshaj. So, like Jalak mentioned, we have one type of plants which are called monocotyledonous plants. And Jalak has also mentioned what dicotyledonous plants are. Yeah, so there are two main or very big groups of plants. One is called monocot or monocotyledonous, and dicots or dicotyledonous. Do you know what this monocot and dicot is based on? Does anybody know?
Yes.
Yeah, Jhalak?
Seeds.
Seed, very nice. So when the seed is, it has two parts. It naturally breaks open into two parts like peanuts. Then there are dicots. So all the plants which will have these natural two parts in the seeds, they will also have reticulate venation, which means the leaf will be broad essentially. It will have one midrib that we mentioned earlier when we were talking about Baya Weavers. Midrib is the main vein, which is the strongest part of the leaf. Yeah, and then there'll be veins that will come out of the main vein and go towards the edge of the leaf. Yeah, so this kind of reticulate means like a web. Yeah, so when the leaf looks like a web of veins, then that's a reticulate venation. So these plants which have a reticulate venation leaf, they will have two parts in their seed. They will have these kinds of leaves, and they'll have a taproot system. So the root will look sort of like a carrot. Yeah, and in monocots, which are like sort of grasses or bamboos or even palms. Yeah, if you look carefully at a palm's leaf, it will have all the veins that run parallel to each other like lanes of a road, and they will not form a net. Yeah, they'll be parallel to each other, very sorted, like they are scolded and made to sit in straight lines, and they will have a fibrous root system. Yeah, so these are the two broad categories of plants. And when we want to identify plants, when we want to know the names that people have decided for plants, this is a very essential or basis of identifying the plants. Okay, maybe we'll have another session about identifying plants, but now let's go back to the birds and imagine we are a any do you know what bird this is? Name this bird, please.
Flat bill. Some
Okay, it's a duck. Very nice.
spot neck duck, I guess.
I forgot the name. I remembered the name. I've read the name, but I forgot it.
Okay.
I think it's an American. No. Something.
Joshika has got it. Joshika has got it in the
Yeah,
chat.
those you guys spot neck duck. I would definitely spot headed, I would call it if I could name this duck. But since it has a very prominent knob on its bill, it's called a knob billed duck. Okay, so even if we don't know what exactly a knob billed duck well how it behaves, we can still imagine us to be a duck and then see how our relationship with the plants is. Anita, I'll come to your question in a while. Is that okay? All right, so thanks. Okay, so a duck, where will a duck rest? Let's begin with resting now. It'll rest in water. But do you think you can rest in water? Can you sleep like this? Some birds do that. Near water bodies, okay. They will float, okay. But I imagine even floating would take some energy and it's not exactly, yeah, it's not exactly restful. And if it's a river or a stream, it'll just, I don't think ducks would go in a stream, but still on banks, okay. Maybe islands, yeah. Edge of the river. Swamp, very nice. Okay. Near nests, okay. Jala, but where would the nests of these ducks be?
Near the banks of some water body.
Okay, near the banks, yeah.
Or maybe a little far away in the dense forest, but near in
Near water for sure, right. So I have some images for the, oh, wow, even I don't have a, okay. So since even for me, this knob-billed, I've seen it just once and I didn't get any good pictures of it. So I thought maybe we should also imagine us to be a stork. So imagine you're a painted stork and then have a go at it. I think we're more familiar with painted stork.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So what does a painted stork eat? Seen many times. Very good, Anvita. They eat fish. Very nice. So they're aquatic birds, and they'll wade into water and get their food from water. Fish. Okay. What about nesting? They will eat aquatic animals. Very nice, Misha. They nest in trees. Exactly. They will be on trees. So even if these birds are aquatic, and they still choose these huge trees around water bodies to make their nests. Yeah, so there is one picture here where you see it's a big nest, and they usually choose these broad canopy trees around water bodies to make their nests. What about resting? We saw in an image earlier that they do choose tops of the trees to rest on. Yeah, so the point of this these particular birds was, even if they're aquatic and they get their food from water and it's not directly connected to trees, they still have to rely on trees for their nesting material. Also, if you see here that their nests are made of twigs and the nest is hoisted or built on a tree as well. Yeah, so even aquatic birds or birds that do not use trees directly are still dependent on trees. That's how important trees are for birds. Yeah. Okay. Now, how about a vulture? Does anyone know what this particular vulture is? Egyptian vulture. It has named it.
Maybe it lives in some really cold climate.
Yeah, it looks like that. Looks like it's wearing a fur coat. Egyptian. It's an Egyptian vulture. Yeah. So forget about Egyptian, but what would you think a vulture eats? So let's go on feeding of a vulture. What does it eat? Meat. Okay. Other animal corpses, dead animals, rotten flesh, dead and decaying matter. Fantastic. Let's imagine this vulture is usually eating something like a cow or a deer carcass. They're scavengers. Fantastic. So the animals that these might be eating, do you think they're dependent on plants? Imagine if it's eating a cow. Rotting fruit. Okay. It's yellow color from cow dung or something. Okay. So you don't think vultures depend directly on plants? No. All right.
I guess they indirectly depend on plants because the animals they feed on actually directly depend on plants.
That's correct. That's very, very well put. Yes. So that is one way of looking at it, looking at their dependency or relation with plants. The animals that they eat, they essentially get their food from plants. Yeah. So the energy that is transferred from one organism to another in the form of food essentially comes into life cycle through plants, because plants use sunlight and they create food, and then some insect or some animal will feed on plants, then another animal will feed on this plant. It's a food cycle, and food cycle begins at plants. Yeah, they're the starting point, or the kitchen of the entire food cycle. Yeah. So any organism, they're producers. Fantastic, elegant Jagdoot. They're producers. So they produce energy, which then keeps circulating in the food web and food cycles. Yeah. So that way, for even its food, the vulture is dependent on the plants. But even for its perching, or so, have you ever noticed how the vultures will wait for its food? How do they know that food is around, or hmm, smell? Very nice. Okay. So for the smell, they will hoist themselves on very high up, on large, tall trees. Yeah. They even look for food. Yeah. So you'll often see these vultures doing rounds. They have good eyesight. Very nice. So they'll keep flying, but they can't constantly keep flying. They'll have to wait somewhere they'll have to rest for some while. So they require, it's a necessity for them to perch on a tree for a while and then again keep circling. So because they don't want to come all the way to the ground unless they have food, they need very tall trees to be in their habitat for them to perch. Yeah, and it's a study that vultures, one threat to vultures also disappearance of these tall trees that people think may not be there, but they're actually used by vultures and other similar birds for perching. So even if trees they look dead, or they don't have any foliage, or they're not really alive, even if they're dead stumps, just a skeleton of a tree, even such kind of trees are used by vultures to perch and rest or look for their food and so on. And this Egyptian vulture in particular, when I looked for nest, it makes nest in cliffs and stuff, but yes, cliffs or rocks. But what is the material that they've used for nesting? They've not used rocks for making their nest, right? They've used dry grass and branches. Oh, bones also. Very nice, Jala. So they've basically used twigs or plant parts from the trees to make their nest. So is that direct dependence on trees then? Even if they don't get their food directly from trees, they still depend on trees. Yeah? Superb. It's a very broad and large nest. That's correct. All right, so now we've seen various kinds of birds that depend on trees for their food, rest, and nest also. Let's go to see how do birds get attracted to, one sec. Okay, the question is, how do birds know which tree to go to, or like, how do basically plants attract birds? You can also unmute yourself and tell me the answer.
Bright colors of fruit.
They use fruits. They look at fruits. Okay. Anything else? Flowers and fruits. Yeah. Anything else? Think of all the activities that the birds have done. Smell and colors. Very nice. Even twigs or dry grasses. Even these kinds of insects. Yes. Very nice. All right. So directly and indirectly, the trees put some effort into attracting birds to them. Yeah. For example, they will have nectar in their flowers, which birds like sunbirds. So when the sunbird can smell, or from their parents, they know that some flower has nectar, they will get attracted to the nectar and they will drink that nectar. Yeah. So plants use nectar in the flowers to attract birds. Another one was fruits. So these fruits have colorful uh, skins, like in case of this fig. It can also be sweet and nutritious, and the birds knows that, so they'll get attracted to these kinds of fruits. What's happening here? This is the image that I wanted to show, which wasn't there in the slide.
That is pollination, I guess.
This is pollination, you think? uh, Firstly, identify
Partly.
part. It's fallen down, it's on the ground, it fell from a tree. Yeah, don't get confused by this
Okay.
grassy thing around here. Let's look at this orange thing and this brown woody thing. Embryo, okay. Eggs, okay. It's a plant part. Then nuts, okay. Anything else? Seeds.
Yeah, actually nuts, I guess.
Yeah, so there's seeds. Nuts are also seeds, a kind of seed. Yeah, so these are seeds. And we often see seed as something black or something unattractive. But look at the color of these seeds. They're orange. Yeah. So just like fruits use attractive colors to attract birds, Even seeds have coatings or arils, they're called. Yeah, they use these colorful arils. Some plants will have colorful arils to attract birds to eat those seeds. Yeah, so some birds might chew or break that seed to eat it. Some might just swallow the seeds and then they will be dropped out of their system when they poop, and that's how the seeds spread. Yeah, so the whole idea of this interaction or plants putting effort to attract birds is for a few particular purposes. What is this purpose? To allow pollination. One, Jalak has got it right. And also seed dispersal. Does anyone know what seed dispersal means?
Spreading of seeds with the help of birds. If the pollen gets stuck into their mouth or maybe somewhere else, they'll go to some other flower or plant and it gets stuck over there and a fruit will be.
Okay. So that's correct, Jalak. But I just have one little correction. Flowers have pollens, and pollens on themselves cannot do anything. They will not grow into a new plant. They have to be taken to the female part of the same or different flower. Then pollination will happen, which is movement of pollen or transfer of pollen to the female part for fertilization, which is what's happening here, which is what nectar in the flowers is for. So the bird will come, it will shake the flower up, and that will cause this pollen to fly off or to get stuck to the bird's body. And when the bird goes to different flower for that nectar, that pollen will go to the female part, and thus pollination will happen. After pollination, uh, there will be fertilization, which means the pollen will reach the egg inside the flower and the fruit will form. Yeah, and inside the fruit there's seed, and the seed is the main, like it's the baby of the plant. So we require seeds, the plant requires seeds to form and to go in faraway places so there can be more plants. Yeah, and even for this purpose plants have used birds, because they have colorful fruits and fruits contain seeds. So the birds will eat fruits and those seeds will stay inside the bird's body, and once it's digested it will poop it out, and that poop will have these seeds, and then when it falls in the right place the seed will germinate, and it will usually be very far from the tree. Yeah, so that is dispersing, means spreading. So spreading of a seed is done by birds. And do you see what's happening in this picture here?
Yes.
Any guesses what's happening here? Check out this part particularly. Anvita is laughing. Why are you laughing, Anvita? This bird is basically pooping, and that poop has seed. Yeah. So this is how the plants attract birds to them, and they give food and nectar and fruits to the birds, and birds do this job for plant of pollination and also seed dispersal. So what happens when these birds will poop in different places? Let's just look at this particular example. Okay, there are some kinds of birds that eat certain fruits, and they will poop out the seeds, and these kind of plants will grow. Do you know what these kind of plants are? Any guesses?
I
So this
guess
is
they are shrub, creeper of climbers.
okay. But do you see this one? It has no leaves. This orange, sorry, not orange. This yellow, light green structure, and this one with broad leaves. It's another plant. So can you guess what's happening here? Same case here. This is a barren tree. Doesn't have leaves of its own, but there's this leafy structure growing on the stem directly. It's not a part of this plant, not the one with this huge trunk and branches. This is a separate plant. Yeah, Jalak?
Parasites.
Correct. So these are parasitic plants. So parasitic plants, what they do is instead of putting their roots in the soil to get water and nutrition, what they'll do is they will put their roots or suckers, they're called, in another plant, and they will get the plant juices from them. They like put a straw inside another plant and suck all the water and nutrients from them. So these parasitic plants, they also very smartly make use of birds. They will produce very yummy, sweet berries that the birds will eat, and they will poop out like this. And this poop is also very sticky. So it will stick to the stem of another plant, which will act as the host or as the parent of these parasitic plants. Yeah. Another way, now we know that figs are very colorful and favorite fruits of few birds. Yeah, so even figs are very smart, and what they have done is this. Have you seen a peepal tree or a banyan tree growing from a wall or from on another tree? Have you ever noticed this? No? Maybe you should look around. When you see these leaves sprouting out randomly from a wall around your house, or even in your building or compounds, you should see what kind of leaves they have. They usually these ficuses, and they sometimes manage to grow like this. So some bird, probably a barbet, it ate a fig fruit once and it pooped on this wall, and in that poop there were seeds of this ficus, of this fig tree, and it started growing here, and now it has taken over the whole wall. Look how beautiful its roots are. Yeah, it is clinging very tightly to that wall. It's not beautiful, Anvita? Does it look scary? Yeah. So something similar happened here. This bird pooped on top of another tree, and that poop had the ficus fruits and seeds, and those seeds started growing. Yeah, and then the stem and root of that fig tree started growing around this tree. Although this tree is not giving any nutrition, no water, no minerals to this tree, it is still using this tree as a support. And these kind of ficuses are called stranglers. I'll write in the chat box what it says. It's called a strangler. Yeah, strangling is like crushing and suffocating. Yeah, so this is what these ficuses are doing. They have this superpower of salt. Yeah, and birds enable this to happen. So they not only carry away the seeds, they also enable this kind of adaptation or this kind of superpower that comes to some trees to grow in whichever condition they can. Trees are very strong, okay? They have this extreme willpower to grow and to thrive and produce flowers and fruits and seeds so that they can continue growing many generations. So trees you'll often find plants growing in from cement on side of a footpath, or even on tar roads. There'll be some cracks there, and if the water goes in there, in monsoon especially, you'll see all kinds of plants growing everywhere because there's a lot of moisture and a lot of scope to grow and thrive. Yeah. Okay, so now that we know how birds and plants related and what each one gets, birds get a place to stay, place to rest and just have a seat, and place to build their nests and lay their eggs, material to make their nests, and also food. So all of this birds get from plants, and plants get pollination and seed dispersal from birds. So it's a mutual advantageous relationship between birds and plants. Yeah. Now, we saw earlier when we were talking about parts of the plants, we know that plants don't look the same all year. Do they? No. What keeps changing? How do plants look different in different parts of the year? Flowers, very nice, Jagjot. Fruit, fantastic. What about leaves? Do the leaves look the same throughout the year? Leaf color, very nice. So some time of the year, the trees they get dry in autumn, very nice. And what happens after that, Sakti? After these leaves get dry, some trees they fall. Fantastic. So it's a cycle. It's this kind of cycle that happens on the trees through the year. Yeah. What are the different seasons in the year? Maybe let's start from there. Which different seasons do we have? Fall season. Very nice. Spring. Spring is one of the seasons. Very good, Shakti. Any other? Flowering season. Very nice. Which is the flowering season? What is it called? Is it summer? Is it winter? Is it monsoon? Summer. Okay. Fruit season, flower season, winter, summer, autumn, rainy. Very nice, Javjot. Thanks for that sign. Different species flower in different seasons. Very nice. So throughout the year, seasons keep changing. So there's sometimes rainfall, sometimes there's extreme heat and dryness in terms of summer. Sometimes there's cold and dryness in case of more autumn and winter. So trees have to keep changing so that they can make the best of these seasons. Yeah, so in monsoon, when there's a lot of water, what they do is they grow out new leaves. Most or certain species of trees, they grow out new leaves. They'll have this young light green or red tender leaves. Yeah, and then these leaves will grow and they'll become matured. And once they have done their job of photosynthesis, of producing food, they eventually get tired and they grow old. And then by the time they're old, it comes the season of autumn, so it's also dry. So these leaves, they eventually retire. They turn yellow because they do not need the green pigment anymore. That green pigment dies and it turns yellow, and the leaves eventually fall off. So once the leaves have fallen off, then comes the season of spring. And what happens in spring? The flower buds come and they open into flowers. Yeah, Shakti says there's monsoon and they adapt according to season, and there are some evergreens also. Very nice. And Vita, you're also correct. There's the spring or summer is the blooming season. Yeah, that's when the flowers come. And what happens after the flowers? Flowers turn into, what is the fruits? Fantastic. So after flowering season, there's fruiting season. So often you'll see once a tree has flowered in summer, in monsoon or early winter, you'll see that tree bearing fruits. Yeah, so the seasons and the trees, they go around in the cycle of leaves, flowers, and fruits. And now we know that birds, they can get the nutrition from flowers, they can get their nutrition from fruits and seeds. They use the leaves for making nests or from getting insects from, and so on. So birds also have to change according to the seasons, according to how the trees are changing. Is that correct? Would you agree that even birds have a cycle that's as per the season? Yes. Shakti, could you give an example of how birds and seasons are related? Or what kind of seasons do birds have? Very nice, Jagjot. They have chicks in spring. Perfect, perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. So they have a mating season, a breeding season, a migration period. So even they choose the seasons in the best way possible so that they can have a good, comfortable life. Yeah. So they migrate during the winters from extremely cold regions to a little warmer regions so that they can get food, and they can mate there, and they can even have build their nests and have chicks there. Yeah. And when mating season is done, there's this chick season when there are a lot of babies around. So most birds will be looking for insects to feed their young ones, to feed their chicks. Yeah. So here's one example that's very famous relation, a very like nicely observed cycle. Flamingos is a very good example, Meher. Thank you. This is an example. Do you recognize this bird? Maybe
It's a tit.
it's a tit. Fantastic. So here, so this example is from England. India doesn't have very direct relations like this. They're not studied or published as a research yet, but that's where we come in. We have the scope to do that. Yeah. So I'll tell you about this example. Okay. So this is a tree called pedunculate oak. It's an oak tree. Yeah. And oak trees have a very fixed cycle. In winter, they will shed all their leaves, and in spring the leaves will come back. Yeah, so it will have a flush of leaves, a lot of young leaves. And when there are a lot of young leaves, this moth caterpillar or larva, what the moth does is, because there's a lot of food for the caterpillar, it will lay eggs. Yeah, so it's the spring season, the leaves are out on the oak tree, this larva or this moth has laid all the eggs, and these caterpillars are out, and the tits require these caterpillars for their babies, so they also lay their eggs and have chicks during this period. So this is where all of this is happening in the spring season. Yeah, so this is how the life cycle of a tree impacts the life cycle of a moth and then life cycle of a bird. Yeah, and have you heard of climate change? Yes. Can anybody tell what climate change is? Tarang, do you want to give it a try? What do you think climate change is? Anything is okay. Whatever you've heard along with this term, climate change is fine. Are you guys typing in the chat box? Okay. It's the change in temperature of the place. Very nice, Anvita. Perfect. So if the temperature is changing, even the seasons will change. The summers will be hotter and the winters will probably be very cold. Yeah, so this kind of changes in the seasons will reflect in the trees, right? Because if the spring is arriving at a different time, if that season has changed, even the trees will change. When their leaves will come, will change. When their flowers will come, will change. When the fruits will be grown, will change. Yeah, so with changing seasons, because of climate change, the trees will change. If the trees change, these caterpillars timing will change. If the caterpillar timing is changed, even the bird cycle will change. So it's a study that because of climate change, the entire cycle that happens from sprouting of new leaves in pedunculate oaks to these tits having their babies, their chicks coming out, their fledglings coming out, has shifted earlier in the year by 3 weeks. So it all depends on plants. That's correct, Anvita. So do you get this idea? Do you get an example? This example of how plants, if plants change, everything, the entire food cycle will change. Is that right? Which is why it's very important to look at plants. Very important to see when they're flowering, when they have new leaves, when their old leaves are falling off, when their fruits are coming out, when their flowers are coming out. Yeah, and I work with a project called SeasonWatch, which does this kind of study. And you all can participate in season watching. What you need to do is look at the trees around you and make a note of when they have leaves, when they have young leaves, when they have old leaves, when they have flower buds or open flowers, or when they have young fruits or ripe fruits. Yeah, so I'll share a resource that maybe you can take a look at later and decide if you want to look at plants with SeasonWatch. Okay. Lastly, now we've discussed how birds and plants are together and they have a very intricate life cycle. So if plants are changing, the birds are definitely going to change because they depend very heavily on plants. Yeah. So the next time when you go for birding, so how can you look at also plants when birding? Here are some tips that I have that I also do when I go for even plant watching and birding both. Yeah. So when you look at a bird, you will identify what that bird is. You guys are very good at birding. Yeah. You remember, you know which bird is what it looks like, what it eats. Yeah. So when you look at bird, you also see where it's sitting. What's that bird sitting on? Yeah. You ask that question. What is that bird sitting on? Is it a tree? Is it a bush? Yeah. And then how are the leaves or the flowers or fruits if present on that tree? So take a nice look at the canopy of the tree also. Right. And what is that bird doing? Is it picking at the bark? Is it drilling in the bark or in the trunk? Or is it plucking some fruit? Or is it smelling some flower? What is it doing on the tree? Yeah, so these are some questions or some ways in which you can look at the trees also when you go for birding. Yeah, and with this, I think I'll stop talking. Okay,